I would now like to give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation. Mr. President, welcome to New York. We're happy to see you in the chair of the President of the Security Council. This is the first meeting under the presidency of Equatorial Guinea in the month of February. We're grateful to you for having granted us with your presence this important occasion, and basically set the tone for the presidency of Equatorial Guinea in the month of February. We will support and assist our friends from Equatorial Guinea. We're grateful to the Secretary General of the United Nations and the Chairman of the African Union Commission for their briefings. We're grateful to the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the African states for having traveled to be at this meeting. We're grateful to Equatorial Guinea for organizing and holding today's discussion. It's no secret that the soldiers of fortune, in spite of the fact that they are liable to criminal persecution in many countries, including Russia, this is still the hard-hitting reality of many modern armed conflicts. In this connection, the topic of mercenariat in Africa proposed to be discussed today is extremely timely. Mr. President, we would like to draw your attention to the fact that the use of mercenaries is often directly linked to the interference into the internal affairs of sovereign states. The Declaration on the Inadmissibility of Intervention and Interference into the Internal Affairs of States of 1981, which was adopted by the UN General Assembly, enshrined the ban on training, financing, and recruitment of mercenaries and their deployment on the territory of another state. That declaration also mentions the responsibility of states not to carry out activities aimed at violating the unity or undermining or overthrowing the political regime of other states. We live at a time when this appeal is extremely timely and relevant. In this way, the unconstitutional change of power and the violent overthrow of the state regime with the support from outside is inadmissible. However, mercenaries are often recruited and financed precisely to achieve these kinds of goals. Mr. President, on the African continent, foreign mercenaries are legion, and they have played a particularly nefarious role. Now, the use of mercenaries to combat national liberation movements in Africa and prevent their realization for self-determination of peoples that were formerly under the yoke of colonialism remains a stain on the conscience of several Western states. Even after the gaining of independence, young African states had to deal with attempts by colonial powers to carry out coups d'etats, often using soldiers of fortune that were often involved in atrocities, torture, and executions of the civilian population. Guided by venal economic goals or the wish not to allow the establishment of independent governments with other ideological views, the former colonial masters willfully embraced the violation of the principles of international law based on the condemnation of colonialism, racism, and foreign hegemony. The issue of the deleterious activity of mercenaries, either in one or other African states, is often examined by the Security Council, which has consistently pointed to the inadmissibility of the use of foreign fighters to destabilize states to violate their territorial integrity and sovereignty. Their nefarious activity is their use is one of the key sources of problems in Africa. Is one of the key sources of the problems facing Africa. and that is the fight to achieve control over the very wealthy natural resources of Africa. We are aware, Mr. President, that Equatorial Guinea just recently had to confront such challenges and managed to overcome them. We share your concerns in this connection, and we strongly condemn any forms of interference into the internal affairs of sovereign states. The many conflicts in Africa, including those provoked from outside, are often breeding grounds for the activity of various types of criminals. The clearest example in this context is the crisis after the operation aimed at regime change in Libya, which dealt a devastating blow to the whole system of regional security and led to large-scale penetration into the countries of the Sahel of weapons and criminal elements. We call on those who are devising similar plans to carefully consider what this short-sighted policy in Libya led to. You should not repeat similar policies in other regions. The problems of Central and Western Africa are compounded in connection with the activity in a number of countries of illegal armed groups as well as terrorist and extremist organizations. The members of these groups are fighting not only for their distorted political goal and ideological goals, but also for money. Now, of particular concern is the situation in Mali, in the Chad Lake Basin, and the Great Lakes region. For the successful fight against these challenges, what's necessary is not the active activity of national and regional armed forces, but also to cut off the financial flows from abroad, which fuel mercenary and extremist activity. We are convinced that to eradicate these phenomena, it's essential to achieve a lasting resolution of conflicts, strengthen state institutions, and first and foremost, the security sector. And also, it's important to implement measures on socioeconomic development. In many cases, support from the international community is essential, and this assistance should only be provided at the request of the countries that need such assistance. Colonial approaches should be a thing of the past, and certain practices that have become state policy, such as the policy of blackmail, threats, and provocations going as far as the illicit attempts against sovereign states, should also be consigned to history. Mr. President, we would like to note that the threats and challenges that the region of Central Africa faces, including mercenary activity, are intertwined and interconnected, and the states themselves are extremely interdependent. Destabilizing the situation in one country could be felt in the entire sub-region and could undermine the security of neighbors, which is why it's extremely important to monitor the situation very carefully. We support the search for African solutions to the problems facing the continent, including the problem of mercenary activity. Now, a strong impetus can be provided by updating the Convention of the Organization of African Unity, the predecessor of the African Union, on the elimination of mercenariat in Africa of 1977. We believe that the document has laid an important groundwork for collective efforts to prosecute and to eradicate this illegal activity on the African continent. Thank you very much.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the representative of